The purpose of this video is to give you a basic understanding of how it is that you prepare your data and upload it into Complexit. Complexit uses basically a CSV file format, which is short for comma-separated values. That's not to say that Complexit can't use other approaches. As you see when you go to the first tab, the separator we set as default as a comma. You could also use semicolons, tabs, or spaces. However, the going way to do it is to do a comma-separated value file. So for those not familiar, what does a comma-separated value file look like? Well, this is one opened up in a basic Word package. You see each of the key variables, factors, causal conditions, however you want to define them, listed up here and separated by a comma. For example, the cases in this database, which is a analysis of multiple deprivation indices in Wales, starts with the case being an area, for example, Cardiff, and then the particular indices analyzed, income in 2014 and 16, and so forth. You'll notice for each of the major authority districts in this area, you have the name, which is the case, followed by the scores that this community has on these particular indices, which are separated by a comma. Now, the typical format that most of us know this in is in an Excel sheet setup. And in fact, we have in Complexit a link here for learning how to create CSV files in Excel. But your basic Excel file is going to take this information that you see here and turn it into an Excel sheet style. So you could bring data from SPSS or Statistica or some other format, MATLAB, or you could just create the database in Excel. But it's a widely used format, it's a simple format, and has proven to be the best approach. In terms of actually constructing the database, you'll see the cases are down the left-hand column, and this is creating a case-based data set. In this case, it's the communities, but it could be individuals, it could be groups, organizations, countries, whatever it is that you're studying. And then their scores for the particular variables being studied. So this being, one case and its case-based profile down. It's as simple as that, setting it up. One thing to note, however, is because we use cluster analysis and computational modeling, machine intelligence, these exploratory types of approaches are sensitive to the variance of variables. Now here, for example, we have income, employment, and birth weight. These are relatively similar in terms of the variance. However, when you get over to mortality rates, it's a much more constricted variance, but at the same time, quite wide in the sense that you're going from 0.22 to 1.76. So in some ways it's more constricted, and yet in other ways it's actually wider. And then you have particulate matter over here going from 0 to 100. The problem with not standardizing the data, and we do therefore recommend standardizing, is when you have variables that differ to this extent, this could disproportionately grab the attention of machine intelligence or cluster analysis when separating cases from each other, because it's the easiest upon which to separate, thereby giving that factor undue weight in determining the actual differences amongst cases. So standardization is a very useful approach. Then once one's ready to save it, it's really about saving as, and then picking this particular file format. You'll see there's a variety of different formats, but the CSV file format is basically how you would save it. And again, as a reminder, it's not necessary that it always be CSV. You could have semicolons, for example. You could have a tab or a space. That's not as important as just making sure that the data is consistent and brought in. Then when you are bringing it into Complexit, make sure that this is the chosen separator identified, and it is the default. And then you simply go ahead and bring the data in as a CSV file. Make sure it says CSV on there. Now then you want to do a check, obviously. Here you have the variables that we just looked at for 2014, so they're there. And then you also want to make sure when you come down here, you look at it, that everything's consistent. So, basically going back and forth and making sure the scores that you have are similar to the scores here, that everything was brought in correctly. One of the other nice things about this approach is that you can subset data as well. So for example, if I only wanted to, after I ran through my analyses and I thought, well, employment isn't that important, so I'm going to take that out, you can subset the data and that will be removed from the data set subsequent for analysis. So it's a very nice flexible tool and allows you to set up your data quite easily and quickly so that you can move on then to the next step, which is to start running the analyses, specifically the cluster analysis.